In the 16th century, one family controlled Europe's wealth, transforming their name into one of the most powerful dynasties in history. But despite their unimaginable fortune, today, the Fugger family is all but forgotten. How did the wealthiest family in Europe disappear into the shadows of history? What happened to their billions? In this video, we uncover the hidden secrets of the Fugger family and reveal the truth behind their lost fortune. The Fugger family's story begins not with royal blood or noble titles, but with the humble beginnings of a man named Hans Fugger. In the late 14th century, Hans, a cloth merchant from the small town of Augsburg, Germany, embarked on a journey that would ultimately lead his descendants to command Europe's vast wealth and power. While his humble beginnings may not seem extraordinary, his ability to navigate the volatile trade routes of Europe marked the beginning of a legacy that would shake the very foundations of European finance. In the early 15th century, Hans's son, Jakob Fugger, took the reins of the family business and transformed it into an empire that would outlive the family's wildest ambitions. Jakob's vision was clear: to build an empire based on industry, finance, and power. However, his ambition wasn't fueled merely by greed. Jakob was a visionary who understood that the world of finance was in flux. As Europe began to recover from the ravages of the Black Death and the 100 Years' War, Jakob saw the opportunity to solidify his family's place in history. Jakob's strategic mind led him to make several key investments that would lay the foundation for the family's incredible fortune. One of the most crucial moments came in 1487 when Jakob gained control over copper mining in Hungary, a move that would allow the Fuggers to monopolize the production of this vital resource across Europe. But Jakob didn't stop there. He was quick to understand that gold and silver were the future of wealth, not just copper. In the same vein, Jakob's keen eye for lucrative ventures led him to gain exclusive rights to supply gold and silver to the Habsburgs, an empire that spanned vast stretches of Europe. Jakob Fugger's influence grew as quickly as his wealth. In a time when banking was an emerging industry, Jakob capitalized on the instability of European monarchs and governments. He loaned massive sums of money to kings and emperors, ensuring that they were indebted to him in perpetuity. The most notable of these loans was to Maximilian I, the Holy Roman Emperor, and the Habsburg Dynasty, which would forever tie the Fugger name to the seat of European power. Jakob was instrumental in financing Maximilian's marriage to Mary of Burgundy, a union that allowed the Habsburgs to expand their influence over vast territories in what is now France and the Low Countries. By the end of the 15th century, Jakob Fugger's wealth was so extensive that he was more than just a banker. He was a kingmaker, manipulating the political and economic landscapes of Europe from behind the scenes. His vast network of political and financial connections allowed him to essentially dictate the course of European history, from wars to trade agreements. Jakob Fugger's success wasn't purely a result of luck. It was a masterful blend of foresight, risk-taking, and relentless ambition. He was one of the first men to understand the power of capital as a weapon of influence. And with his unparalleled network, the Fugger family had not just amassed wealth, they had earned a seat at the very table of power, where they could shape the course of history itself. By the time of Jakob's death in 1525, the Fugger family had amassed an unimaginable fortune, owning vast estates, gold mines, and an intricate banking empire that spanned across Europe. The family was no longer just a dynasty of bankers, they were kingmakers and royal advisors, whose influence reached as high as the very thrones of Europe. But Jakob's fortune wasn't just about money, it was about the ability to shape the future, to control the flow of wealth, and to guide the destinies of Europe's most powerful rulers. Jakob Fugger's death in 1525 marked not just the loss of an extraordinary individual, but also the turning point for an empire that had grown too large to be controlled by one person. The Fugger family's vast fortune and influence had been built on Jakob's genius, but the question remained: could his descendants hold on to the empire he had so carefully constructed? As the 16th century unfolded, Jakob Fugger's legacy was carried on by his descendants, but the story of the Fugger family's fortune was no longer just about one man's brilliance. The dynasty had become a monumental force in Europe's financial world, and its influence reached far beyond the borders of Augsburg. What Jakob had started with a sharp eye for investments, his successors nurtured into an empire that straddled politics, economics, and social influence. However, as with any great dynasty, the greater the rise, the harder the fall. Jakob's nephew Anton Fugger took the helm of the Fugger Empire after Jakob's death, but his approach was markedly different. While Jakob had carefully manipulated the political landscape to create his wealth, Anton saw a different path to prosperity, one rooted in diversification. Jakob had primarily built his fortune by financing wars, providing loans to kings, and securing monopolies in gold and silver mines. Anton, however, decided to broaden the family's business ventures, investing heavily in real estate and luxury goods. This strategic shift wasn't just about securing wealth, it was about ensuring the Fugger family's survival in an ever-changing world. By the mid-1500s, the Fuggers had become Europe's financial powerhouse. Their fortunes weren't limited to the gold and silver markets that had been Jakob's bread and butter. They now held vast estates across the continent, particularly in Spain, Italy, and the Austrian territories. In fact, their holdings in real estate alone accounted for a substantial portion of their wealth. Anton's expansionist approach was so effective that by the late 16th century, the Fuggers were entrenched in nearly every aspect of European commerce. Their wealth grew, and so did their political influence. The family was not merely content with controlling minds and financing monarchs. They understood that to truly secure their legacy, they needed to exert control over entire economies. It was during this period of unprecedented growth that the Fuggers became key players in European politics. Their wealth and influence made them indispensable allies to the Habsburg monarchs, particularly Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor. The Fuggers provided essential funding to the Spanish crown during the emperor's campaigns in the Low Countries, and in return, the family was granted even more favorable terms on loans, further cementing their grip on the economy. The family's financial empire expanded from banking and mining to include luxury textiles, manufacturing, and trade monopolies. The Fugger family was not simply a banking dynasty, they had become a corporate empire. Their influence extended to the management of the Habsburg lands, where they built castles, established agricultural monopolies, and maintained close ties with the royal family. In essence, the Fugger family was shaping the economic policies of Europe's greatest empire. They were not just funding wars, they were financing the very infrastructure that upheld monarchies across the continent. Their power reached its zenith in the 16th century as the Fuggers seemed untouchable, with no rival to their wealth, influence, and reach. However, even as their fortunes grew, the Fuggers knew the risks of their position. They had carefully aligned themselves with powerful royal families, but they also understood that such alliances could easily turn against them. The Fugger family's rise was built on the very system that could easily dismantle them, the volatile and ever-changing nature of European politics and war. As the century progressed, tensions within Europe began to mount, and the Fuggers would soon find themselves at the mercy of the very forces they had so carefully cultivated. The Fugger family's vast empire was beginning to show cracks beneath the surface, and while they were expanding rapidly into new territories, new challenges were beginning to emerge. The family's success had attracted jealous rivals, and their political entanglements were about to become more complicated than ever before. The Fugger name, once synonymous with power and invincibility, was about to face its first true test. As the Fugger family reached the apex of their financial empire, it seemed that nothing could threaten their supremacy. However, history has shown that great wealth and power often breed overconfidence, and no dynasty can escape the laws of rise and fall. By the early 17th century, the cracks in the Fugger foundation began to deepen, and it became clear that even the most well-established families are not immune to the consequences of their actions. The very same qualities that had propelled the Fugger family to greatness, ambition, strategy, and a relentless thirst for power, were now their undoing. The seeds of the Fugger family's downfall can be traced back to a fundamental flaw that many powerful dynasties share: greed. Despite their immense wealth, the Fuggers remained hungry for more. While Jakob Fugger had been a strategic mastermind, careful in his investments and keeping a tight grip on his affairs, his successors, particularly Antonio Fugger, became more reckless in their pursuits. Antonio, who took control of the family empire after his uncle Jakob's death, lacked the same cautious approach to wealth that had defined the family's early success. He expanded the family's reach, but in doing so, he overextended the Fuggers' financial resources. The family began to invest in riskier ventures, everything from speculative land deals to overly ambitious trade monopolies, hoping to replicate Jakob's early success. But instead of thriving, these ventures began to sink the family's resources. While Antonio's ambitions were large, they were ultimately misguided. He borrowed heavily, and the Fuggers were soon caught up in an endless cycle of debt. The family's vast holdings in real estate, mining, and banking were not as profitable as they once had been. At the same time, political turbulence across Europe, wars, shifting alliances, and the rising influence of rival banking families disrupted the stability the Fuggers had enjoyed for so long. The family's deep entanglement in European politics meant that they were vulnerable to every twist and turn of the political landscape. For example, their close relationship with the Habsburgs, while lucrative for decades, began to sour as the family's fortune became increasingly tied to a declining Spanish empire. When the Habsburg monarchy began facing military defeats and financial collapse, so too did the Fuggers' fortunes. But the most pivotal blow came from the unexpected bankruptcy of the Fugger Bank itself. The family's bank had once been one of the most trusted in Europe, offering substantial loans to monarchs and securing trade deals that profited both the family and the crown. However, as war ravaged Europe and the Fuggers' loans began to sour, their once unshakable bank began to wobble. Political instability in Spain, particularly during the 30 Years' War, caused many of the Fuggers' loans to go unpaid. As countries fell into disarray, the family's investments in their mining operations and land holdings also began to lose value. By the late 1600s, much of the Fugger fortune had been depleted, and they could no longer maintain the lavish lifestyle that had once been the hallmark of their legacy. But even more damning was the Fugger family's shifting alliances. Their relentless pursuit of wealth and power had drawn them into complex political relationships with Europe's royal families, and their ties to the Habsburgs and the Spanish crown ultimately contributed to their downfall. When the Spanish monarchy faced bankruptcy and internal strife, it wasn't just a political failure, it was a financial one that pulled the Fuggers down with it. Their political connections, which once served as their foundation, had become a burden. The Fuggers' decline was also marked by internal discord. With the wealth spread thin across multiple branches of the family, internal power struggles emerged. The Fuggers were not the cohesive, well-oiled machine they once were. Divisions between the descendants of Jakob Fugger's siblings led to infighting and poor decision-making. While some of the family sought to preserve the Fugger empire, others were more concerned with protecting their individual wealth. This fracture weakened their ability to respond effectively to the challenges they faced, both financially and politically. By the time the Fugger family's influence had waned, their empire had crumbled. The vast estates they once owned, the influential positions they held in European courts, and the financial institutions they had built all fell into disrepair. The Fugger name, which had once been synonymous with power, wealth, and influence, was now a shadow of its former self. In the end, the Fugger family's empire was destroyed not by external enemies, but by their own hubris. Their greed for more power and wealth, their over-reliance on political alliances, and their internal family struggles ultimately led to their downfall. What began as a shining example of ambition and financial prowess had become a cautionary tale. One of too much too soon, and the inevitable collapse that follows. The story of the Fugger family's spectacular rise and fall has captivated historians, economists, and conspiracy theorists alike. For centuries, people have speculated not only about how such an immense fortune evaporated, but also whether there were darker, hidden forces at play. While the historical narrative paints a picture of financial mismanagement and shifting political tides, there are numerous conspiracy theories that suggest something far more sinister occurred. Were the Fuggers' vast wealth truly lost to the passage of time, or did something or someone deliberately orchestrate their downfall? One of the most enduring conspiracy theories revolves around the mysterious disappearance of their assets. The Fuggers had been involved in numerous high-stakes financial ventures, including the mining operations of Tyrol, the extensive loaning of money to European monarchs, and vast land holdings across Europe. As their empire began to crumble, many of these assets seemed to disappear. Some historians argue that much of their wealth was carefully hidden away, with rumors circulating that the Fugger family had stashed away treasure chests of gold, silver, and rare artifacts in secret vaults, far from the prying eyes of creditors and rival families. As the Fuggers' political influence waned, it's said that high-ranking officials within the Holy Roman Empire and beyond, fearful of the Fuggers' ability to rebound, seized their assets in a covert operation. Some even claim that the Habsburgs, with whom the Fuggers had maintained an intimate and profitable relationship, secretly undermined their financial empire as part of a grander scheme to keep control of Europe's wealth within the royal family. After all, Jakob Fugger had once loaned vast sums to Emperor Charles V, and the rise of new powers made old alliances less secure. There's even talk of rival families, perhaps those with ties to the banking world or noble houses, quietly acquiring the Fugger family's holdings, using influence, bribery, or sheer power to erase the Fuggers' claim to dominance. The most tantalizing conspiracy theory, however, centers around the Fugger family's secretive role in early global finance. In the 16th century, the family's banking operation was the engine that powered the economies of Europe, funding wars, supporting monarchs, and controlling industries from mining to textiles. But what if the true extent of the Fugger fortune went beyond European borders? What if their reach was global, stretching into the Americas, Africa, and even Asia? Some have speculated that the Fuggers may have invested in colonial exploits, in transatlantic trade routes, or even funded expeditions to undiscovered territories. Yet, these investments were never fully documented or accounted for. Was the Fugger family's decline simply a case of bad investments, or were they deliberately erased from history to hide the scale of their financial empire? Another theory involves the Fugger family's involvement in secret societies. During the Renaissance and into the 17th century, numerous secretive organizations such as the Freemasons and the Rosicrucians were said to have influential members in the highest echelons of society, including bankers, royals, and merchants. Some suggest that the Fugger family, with their enormous influence over European politics and finance, may have played a role in shaping the direction of these societies. The theory proposes that the family's wealth was funneled into covert networks, only to be systematically wiped from the historical record as part of a larger plan to control the flow of wealth through more secretive channels. Did the Fugger family become pawns in a global game of shadowy financial manipulation, with their wealth dispersed into unknown territories, never to be seen again? Perhaps the most unsettling theory lies in the idea that the Fugger fortune was deliberately destroyed by those who saw it as a threat to their own power. As the family's reach grew, so did their enemies. The Fugger family's empire, once a beacon of financial innovation, might have been too much of a target for greed and jealousy. Conspiracy theorists suggest that rival bankers or influential political figures feared the Fuggers' overwhelming control over Europe's economy. It is suggested that they orchestrated a series of strategic moves, bankruptcies, military conflicts, even political assassinations, to systematically dismantle the Fugger empire from within. Some believe that the family's downfall was not entirely driven by the fading value of their investments, but that their financial network was deliberately sabotaged, leaving the Fugger family unable to recover their vast fortune. Documents, records, and deeds could have been tampered with, forcing the family to lose control over their assets, while the world at large saw the once great banking dynasty crumble under its own weight. For many, these theories about the Fugger family's lost fortune remain compelling, adding a layer of mystery to an already enigmatic dynasty. Whether true or not, these stories hint at something deeper: the possibility that the true fate of the Fugger fortune was never meant to be known, hidden behind a veil of conspiracy, manipulation, and greed. The Fugger family's wealth may have largely faded into history, but their influence and legacy remain surprisingly resilient, with traces of their fortune still visible in the fabric of modern Europe's financial institutions and landmarks. While the grand banks, mining empires, and vast estates the Fuggers once controlled are no longer in their hands, the echoes of their impact can still be felt today. The story of what's left of their fortune is one of transformation, preservation, and quiet reverence for a dynasty that once shaped the course of history. One of the most enduring aspects of the Fugger family's legacy is their significant role in the development of banking systems. Jakob Fugger, the family patriarch, essentially laid the groundwork for modern banking practices with his sophisticated credit systems, use of promissory notes, and complex financial instruments. The methods he pioneered are still in use today in the world's financial markets, particularly in the area of central banking. The Fugger family's intricate dealings and the relationships they forged with European monarchs helped to establish an early framework for what would become the global financial networks of today. But perhaps the most direct and visible aspect of the Fugger legacy is seen in their architectural contributions. Although their vast land holdings were dissipated over the centuries, the family's impact on the architectural landscape of Europe remains tangible. In the heart of Augsburg, their hometown in southern Germany, stands the Fuggerhof, a building complex that was once part of the family's financial operations. Today, the Fuggerhof is a symbol of the family's enduring influence, with its Renaissance architecture and historical significance drawing tourists and historians alike. The Fugger Chapel, located within the St. Anna Church, is another architectural marvel that continues to stand as a testament to their wealth and devotion to both religion and community. As for the Fugger family's money, despite the loss of most of their assets during their decline, remnants of their fortune still reside in private collections and hidden treasures. Artworks commissioned by the family, including paintings by masters such as Albrecht Dürer, are scattered across private estates and museums. Some historians speculate that the family's lost gold and silver could still be locked away in secret vaults, untouched by time, awaiting rediscovery. What remains clear is that the Fugger family's financial empire, while no longer active in its original form, still reverberates through the world's banking systems, in the historic buildings they left behind, and in the whispered stories of lost riches. As we continue to uncover the truth about their legacy, we are reminded that while great fortunes may vanish, the impact of powerful families like the Fuggers never truly disappears. Their story, wrapped in both triumph and tragedy, serves as a lesson about the impermanence of wealth and the resilience of legacy. The Fugger family's story has been reduced to mere history, yet the whispers of their lost wealth continue to echo through the ages. The truth behind their fortune, hidden away in dusty vaults and untold alliances, may never come to light. However, what remains clear is that the Fugger dynasty's legacy continues to shape the world of finance. A reminder that even in the world of banking, where wealth is measured by figures on a ledger, the greatest fortunes may be the ones that were never meant to be found. The Fugger family's incredible rise and fall serve as a powerful reminder that even the wealthiest dynasties can fade into history. But the question remains, where did their fortune truly go? Will we ever uncover the lost treasures of one of Europe's most influential families? The mystery still lingers, and their legacy is forever etched into the fabric of European history. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the forgotten fortune of the Fugger family, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more untold financial stories. Drop your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Do you think their wealth is hidden somewhere out there? Let us know. Thanks so much for watching. See you all in the next video.